Hello, welcome to Power BI Cloud series from DoSQLBI.com. In the previous session, we had an overview of Power BI on cloud. In the current session, we will go over natural query language feature of Power BI, also known as Q&A. In the following session, we'll have data management gateways, big data, and machine learning integration. In natural query language, we'll start with asking some questions. For that purpose, we'll use some sample models that come with Power BI, and we'll also use timesheet data model that we had developed in another series on Power BI dashboards. Let's switch to Power BI account. After we log into Power BI and go to the Power BI site, we see all the documents that are available there. So these are three samples that come with Power BI. We will go to Power BI site and we can see these samples here. So these three samples are available and there are some featured questions. We'll see later on adding some featured questions, and there are featured reports. So two of these workbooks which are available as samples. So we have birth trend forecast sample, Olympic sample, and World Bank indicator sample. Two out of three have been also enabled as featured reports. We'll see later how to do that. Now let's straight away go to asking questions with Power BI Q&A. Just before we do that, we need to enable workbooks for Q&A. So again, let's see how many of them have been enabled. I click on this ellipse. Add to Q&A means it's not already added. Which one? This birth trend forecast. And let's see if this one is added. Yes, that's why we see the option remove from Q&A. And the third one, World Bank indicators, remove from Q&A. So out of these three sample files, we see that two of them have been added to Q&A. Now when we click on ask with Q&A, we see a place where we can start typing questions in a natural query language, and there are already some stored questions which are available here. Let's first take a look at some of them. Now if we see this one, it says sports with most medals. If I click on this question, we are getting the name of the sports and the count of the medals that particular sports had in the Olympics. So we didn't do anything. We just pulled some saved question which was there, what's called as featured questions, and we could see what was typed there. Sports with the most medals. If we go back, GDP for India, China, and US by year. So this is another saved question. When I click on this, this is the GDP by year for China, India, and United States. Now, if you see, it showed us that this question was answered from the workbook named World Bank Indicators. The previous question that we saw on Olympics was answered from the other workbook. Q&A automatically detects where from it can get the answer out of all those workbooks that are enabled for Q&A. We'll see some more details later in this session how to influence that. Let's start typing some questions. We say show medal count by country. Now what it did is it automatically thought that the best visual to show that is the map, and then it's asking us that privacy warning so that it could just send this data to Bing Map to overlay on the map. So we say enable that, and we are seeing across various countries what was the medal count. Now if I want to see this as table, now I am forcing it to show me the results of this question as a table. But this also provides me, some feature like I can click on the fields, see out of the data model which tables and were used and which columns it picked up automatically to get this question answered. I could also see these filters where if we want we can do some filtering here. We can add some filters in the question itself, and then under show it gives me option how I want to see that. Now we could also say show as pie chart, because large number of countries, so it's giving us this warning there are too many country values. That's why we see a long list of legends. So not a good graph. If we don't mention anything, it has this inbuilt intelligence to pick up the most appropriate visual for this kind of a question. I could add things like where medal count is greater than 300. There's a limited list of countries where the medal count was greater than 300. So this was just to get a quick glimpse of asking questions in a natural query language. And out of all the workbooks that were enabled for Q&A, it determines which model is having the most relevance for the question that has been asked. Let's continue asking some more questions. Say I ask it show GDP growth by country and year for China and India. Now it automatically thought that the best visual for the given question is a line chart, and if you see, this time it picked up the answer from World Bank indicators data model. So all the workbooks that are enabled for Q&A, the given question is analyzed across all those workbooks, and then the answer picked up. We have a way to force the question to be answered from a particular workbook. Suppose if I want all my questions to be answered from World Bank indicators workbook, I can just pin this. Now whatever question I ask, that is going to be answered from this one. Let's try to ask it the question related to medal count and then see what it does. I say show medal count by country. When I asked this, it was not able to get the appropriate answer. If you see, what it showed me is it's showing me the list of countries from the World Bank indicators model, and I could go to the fields and see really where from and what it picked up. So it thinking that I have a country here by country, so it tried to get something, what might be relevant. But if you see, it has grayed out this initial part of the query, which is show medal count, because it couldn't find anything in this data model that we forced it to use. Now if I remove this, which means I'm just allowing it to see across all the workbooks that are enabled for Q&A, it's able to get the answer. Now you see, the whole query is active. There isn't anything that is grayed out, which means it was able to get the answer. And we could also see the fields and what it was picked up and where from it was picked up. What we'll do now is we'll go and add our own workbook, which we have developed in the another series on Power BI dashboards, which was about timesheets. So let's start with uploading that. Once the upload is completed, what we do is we go to Power BI. So I have this open in another window here. I go to, what it essentially do is it adds all the documents in our Power BI site document library. So earlier I had three samples. Now that we added this timesheet, I have to do few settings before I could start using it. So if I first click on this Eclipse, I see only very limited options. The one that I will start with is enable. So I am enabling it for Power BI. So it gives me that to start interacting with this with Power BI for Office 365, I need to enable it. So confirming that, I'm saying okay, enable. It takes few moments depending upon the size of the workbook as well. Now that it is enabled, I could just close it or start seeing this. Now I'm closing it. Once I enabled this, what I could do next is I have multiple options. Add to feature reports, add to Q&A, schedule data refresh. We'll see that in the data management gateways session. So what I'm going to do is I'll say add to Q&A. As soon as I say add to Q&A, this will be included when we go to Q&A for finding the answers. And I could also add this to the feature reports. Once I do that, you see under the featured reports, I had earlier only two. Now timesheet is also there. Now let's go to Q&A. In Q&A, I can start asking questions. Show total hour by project name as table. Now it's breaking the timesheet data by the projects. I could say show me. Now I just said name. Now it took name as a practice name. So one could just click on the fields and then see what it picked up from where. Now in this case, it has picked up this total hours and it has picked up the name from the practice. That's why we see this, the name of the practice, central, combined, east, and internal. I could ask it to show me total hours by manager name. Now this time it picked up the name from the manager. So I could start asking questions and I could just say show me total hours by month, year, name. Now when I am doing this, okay, so the name is already typed here. I can ask show it. So instead of, if I remove as table, it will pick up the best visual that it thinks is most appropriate for this kind of a query. So what I could now do is I want to add this to a featured questions. Let me select and copy the text of this question and go to show featured questions. Under featured questions, I can click on add, paste the question that I had earlier typed, and I can select some visuals, whatever is appropriate. I can also give some background image URL for this and then save this question. So what it did now is it added this show total hours by month, year, name. It saved this under the featured questions. So when we come to Power BI Q&A portion, I can directly click on this question and see the results that were there. If I check this show on the Power BI site homepage and save this question and go back to main page of Power BI, this question that I just added should show up there. So here you go. I can directly click here and see the results. Now this time it's not looking across the workbooks. Whenever that question was added, whatever context it built up, it tied that question to that particular workbook model. Let us run some more queries. Say show employee name and billing week. Now when we run this query, we are getting this week compliance, employee status, doesn't seem to be matching because we had asked it for employee name and number of weeks he has billed so far, which essentially if I go to the employees table, we are asking for this billing weeks and we are asking for employee name. But what we are getting is we are getting billing weeks, but we are getting some other columns. We are not getting the names. The way Power BI Q&A interpreted the question and then analyzed all the available workbooks that are enabled for Q&A and thought this was the best answer it could pick up. This is where comes the tuning part of data model for the purpose of Q&A. Let's see one more example. So we'll say show employee name and time of category. So it was not able to find anything relevant that it could show as an answer to this question. Let's switch back to our presentation. We looked at asking some questions using natural query language on sample data models and the timesheet data model. Next is tuning of the data model for Q&A so that we get more appropriate and relevant answers. One way we do that is in the data model we specify the data types for each of the item in a data model. We specify the data category. We'll see that in a moment. We have a way to define the table default field set and behavior. We'll see what that is. And there is this very useful feature for Q&A that we can create table level and column level synonyms. That is basically a way to create an additional metadata that Q&A processor uses to get the most appropriate answer to our questions. So how do we get that? We need to do a little bit of Excel setup to have the synonyms feature available to us. Let's take a quick look at that. When you log into your Office 365 Power BI account and then go to Office 365 settings, and then you have this software option, install and manage softwares. Under that you go to desktop setup and there you run this setup. Once you do that, you will see this Microsoft Office 365 setup, and because I've already done this, it was just to show that where you need to go to run that setup to be able to see this synonymous feature in Excel Power Pivot. So I opened this Excel workbook that we had developed in our another series, Power BI dashboards. Let's go and see under Power Pivots. Open this data model and do data model tuning for Q&A. When we go under Advanced tab, we see this synonyms. Synonyms was added when we ran that Office 365 setup, and then you get this option. We will go over this and then we'll see the table behaviors, default data set, and data categories. These are some of the tunings that we can do to the data model, which is an helpful input to Q&A process to get the most relevant answers. Let's start with synonyms. So what we'll do is we'll go table by table and try to clean up the synonyms for each of them. So I clicked on this project name, which is one of the table we have, and it's showing me how it is named. Now what I would like to do is to make it as natural as is the vocabulary used in the business. So what I would want to call the table. Now this is the how you want to name the whole table, and these are various columns in that table, in that model. So I would name this as project, and this is overdue approval. So we'll say project overdue approval. And then this name, because we have names in various models, for example manager name, practice name, I would name this as project name. Now this doesn't affect the actual table structure, the model. It is just that we are creating the synonyms, and we have option to create more than one, separating them with the comma. So for project name table, which was looking very unnatural, when you would say project name, you would think that you are referring to the name of the project, and our table itself is named as project name. So without having any impact on the table structure and the model, we are creating synonyms that will help Q&A. So let's go to the manager table. I would name the table as such as managers, and this overdue approval I would add as manager overdue approval. I would leave this alone. I would just, instead of this short form of manager, I would name this as manager status, and I would have just name as manager name. Similarly, we go to status, and I think this is fine. I'll go to billing type. The table name is billing type, and the column name also is billing type. So it may be better to have this as billing type name. We can go to week off. So this may be better to have as maybe just a single word, week off. Week starts on year, month name, week name. Now this, it might be better to name it fully YEAR instead of just YR. A month year name, month year, billable total and non-billable total. Okay, then we can go to employee, name the table first as employees. We can go to this, instead of just OTR we call is OTRs. Instead of having this as time off as two words, we may call it as time off category. Employee name is fine as employee name. Now this, instead of just an EMP, we may call it as employee billable. EMP timesheet as employee timesheet, and target and actual. So we can go to practice, name this as practices, and have this name as practice name. We can move on and go to this world minimum leaves. Now see, it has created by default the name as leaves, world leaves. Then we say these days we may call as world leave days. This is time off category, and then this is country, but we can also have it as time off category country. So this way we created various synonyms. We can do that what might be required for this. For example, instead of calling it as table name as table ARMS, we call it as timesheet. Similarly, project could be project manager. Week starts on billing type and employee. So this is the exercise where we create the synonyms and then see what is making more sense to the business language in our scenario. Under data category, let's see what options are there. So we can go to the data view, which is little easier to do the rest of the tuning. Go to the advanced one and start with the first table. Next step for data model tuning for Power BI Q&A is to ensure data type is defined for each of the columns. So if I select in table ARMS, I'm selecting project, and I see it is correctly defined as text. So we make sure that everything is defined as it should be. So this is date, billing. Now this is decimal, whereas this is going to be in whole number. So we can multi-select a few of them and choose the data type as whole number. Similarly, we go on checking the other data types. So this is as expected, checking these numbers which we are changing to whole number. We will repeat the same exercise for rest of our tables in the model. After setting the data type, we will take a look at the table behavior. So let's click on the table behavior. It's asking me what is the row identifier. So in this table we don't have anything as a row identifier because this is a transaction table. So let's go to project name and see what is the table behavior there. In our example case, our row identifier is the name of the project itself, and we can say the default label that we want is name. We could have set the image also, uh, which we don't have in our case. So we'll go through rest of the tables and set the table behavior. There is this option of setting the default field set, which essentially does what is, I can just say that when we pull the manager entity, what are the columns that should come along with that. So I can just say manager name and then manager status are two things that should get displayed when I want to refer to the manager entity. So to sum up, we tune the data model for Q&A, which is basically adding an additional metadata to our model that Q&A service will utilize to get the most relevant and appropriate answers to our questions asked in a natural query language. After doing all the model tuning, we'll save these changes. After saving the changes, we'll upload updated data file. The data model tuning changes I saved into another copy of a timesheet. Now what we'll do is we'll see how does it make a difference when we run our natural query language queries. Let's go to Power BI. Now we are going to see we have now here second timesheet Power Pivot workbook. Let's quickly do the steps that we need to do to make it available to Q&A. So I'm first enabling it. Now that it's enabled, let us add this to Q&A. So this got added to Q&A. Now we can move to Power BI Q&A section. Let's now see what was the difference by tuning the data model for Q&A. I'll say show employee name, comma, billing week. Now when this query is answered from an earlier Power Pivot workbook that was not tuned for Q&A, we get the answer that we saw some time back. Now I am forcing it to use the tuned data model, the same query, and we'll see what would be the results that it would produce. Now it's now showing what is expected, the employee name and the billing week. If I want to be sure, it chose by default the bar chart. I want to see a tabular data. So the same query, if executed against timesheet which was not tuned for Q&A, I'm getting some data. I'm getting the billing week, but it's giving me something additional that I did not ask for. It's not giving me the employee name. So but when I go to the tuned one, it's giving me the appropriate results. Let's try one more query. I say show employee name, comma, time off group. Now I got the results from the tuned data model, which was the second copy of the timesheet. I get the name of the employees and which time of group that employee falls under. And if I force the query to be answered from the untuned data model, I'm not getting the employee name. So these are the benefits of tuning the data model for Q&A. Let's switch back to the presentation. So what we saw that is we tuned the data model by specifying the data types, data category wherever applicable. We set the table behavior and the default field set for a table, and we added the synonyms for tables and the columns. And to be able to set the synonyms, we will have to first run the Office 365 setup from our Office 365 account. So how can we share the queries? We can directly send the URL of those query results, the question results that we ask. We'll take a quick look at that. And other way is we could save some questions as featured questions, something that we saw earlier in this presentation. Let's take a quick look at the URL links. Let's switch to the Q&A. Suppose I'm running a query saying show medal count by country. Now this query, when I enable this, This is the result of the query, which is basically this whole URL that's out there. Now what we could do is I can directly give this whole URL to someone, but obviously they should have an access to this Office 365 account. I can paste this URL, send it to someone, and I should get the same result set back. So it's just asking me for that privacy warning, and it's showing me the results. So one way is, provided the user has access to Office 365 account and we share the URL of the results of the query, they can directly go and see that result. Let's switch back to presentation. The second way to sharing was through featured questions, which we saw some time back. Now about Q&A execution, as you would have felt, there are a few things to keep in mind. Number one, the way these natural language query engine processes these queries is it interprets the queries and it goes through all the Power Pivot models that are enabled for Q&A. It then scores the relevance of the results across those workbooks and assigns a score, based on the appropriateness and the relevance factor. Once that is done, the results that are scored the highest, it takes that query based on the data model and then chooses the best suited visuals. There are things that would influence this Q&A execution engine. One that would be data model tuning. If we would have done the tuning in terms of synonyms, in terms of defining the data type for each of the column in the model, and data categories. So all that would influence the execution of the query that we are going to write. And then it also depends upon the number of Q&A enabled workbooks. So if there are more workbooks, that would be included in the interpretation phase of execution of natural language queries. So what we have seen so far is an overview of Power BI on cloud. And in the previous session, we had an overview. In this session, we went through natural language query, what it is, how to configure that, and how to tune it. And in the following sessions, we'll go through data management gateways and integration with big data and machine learning. I'm Nasir Ali Mirza at DoSQLBI.com. Thank you.